pissing me off that this. Okay, here we go. Now we're on. We're live. Sorry about that, folks, for the slight delay there. Technical. Oh, and okay, technical issues. But very excited to have this talk today with Matt Quinn of Journey. Matt and I met up a couple of weeks ago at this point, right? Or maybe even months ago here in beautiful, rainy New York City today. But we'd love to get into this topic with you guys about what comes after the render on this episode of Design X BizDev. Matt, thank you so much for jumping on the pod. Please introduce yourself, and we can start getting into it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. Matt Quinn. I'm a managing director at Journey, which is experience design agency. We do multidimensional design because we think of all of the different dimensions of human interaction, as well as we are across a number of sectors. So we try to think of experience from many different aspects: physical, virtual, digital. And my own background, I studied architecture to do set design. So I started in film and television and theme park design. And then I moved into exhibition design, mainly focused on architecture and the communication of architecture in cities. And that sort of led me into field of experience design. So many people tell me I have an unusual career, but I've seen the creative profession from lots of different angles, as a designer, as a creative director, as a communicator, as I ran my own studio and running or being part of the team that runs quite a large studio now.
Yeah, we have some comments here in the chat. Maybe you can't see them, Matt, but Heather and Renee Hampton say hi. So shout out to you guys. But
it's nice to have friends join. Thank you for joining.
Matt, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about your background and just how varied it is, and combining, I guess, your experience in architecture, production design, experience, and kind of just telling me, like, how did you decide, along this path? And it kind of seems like getting into Journey makes sense because it does combine all of those disciplines, but also maybe you can break down kind of experience design for folks in the audience who might not be the most familiar.
Yeah, I think it's, I think that the term was coined, say, in the 90s by Joe Pine. I don't know if he invented the term, but he certainly coined it. And he wrote the book called The Experience Economy. And that was a sort of economist from an intellectual or sort of collegiate framework, thinking about, what this means in terms of the difference between, to give one of his examples, which I think is a very simple framework. The reason why Starbucks was maybe successful in the early days is because they wrote your name on the cup. And that simple gesture separated going into a Starbucks as to going into another coffee shop. So there's that sort of personalization. And actually, from his point of view, they went wrong as soon as they stopped doing that. So at some point, they were like, "Oh, this is a pain, and it doesn't scale very well," so they stopped doing it. So it's sort of thinking about or looking at the world from a visitor's point of view, and it's not just what happens after you buy a ticket and take a seat. It's all of the things that happen before you arrive somewhere, while you're there, what you do afterwards. And all of us as human beings understand, like, going to restaurants or going to a movie or going to a sporting match. But then this started to permeate into sort of the world of museums and the world of galleries or Airbnb, and like as people became their own hosts and their own creator of experiences. So it's sort of formalized as an industry. It's probably still nascent on some level, but it's like many things, until they're really measured and become part of a gross national product of a country, they're not really taken seriously. So it is still a little bit of a nebulous term, but the unique thing about Journey, where I sit now, is that it's made up of many different studios that had these sort of very specific corners of the world. So whether that was creating content for a museum or creating a nightclub or a restaurant or working on a film set or working in a theme park. So they had a very specific lens in terms of experience. And what we're doing now is pulling them all together so that we can be a better partner to our clients that really they want to drive footfall typically, or convince people to come back again to something, or stay longer, or move their business into a building, or move into a city. And they need experts that can help them think through some of the drivers of that. How I came into it is, I think a lot of people, I mean, I certainly, I like speaking to young people who are getting into the profession of the creative industry. And I guess what I normally tell them is that there's many lanes, right? There's many paths to go down. You don't ever have to stay in one in particular if you don't want to. I mean, we speak a lot about, there's certain professions like architecture and engineering that, you invest so much in the training and the licensing, so it kind of keeps you on one path. But most parts of the creative business allow you to kind of shift and move. And if you're passionate about it, there's lots of entry points. And like myself, I started in one kind of different industry. Yes, Journey is a combination of those. There's like something weird that's happened in my life where all of it's combined into one agency. But I have taken a lot of opportunities to dabble into different areas and sectors, and just opportunistic in terms of what it means to work in the creative profession.
Yeah, no, I love Journey, and it's such an interesting idea of like, how can we fold together so many different disciplines? I think there's something odd that happened maybe in post 80s where there started to be a lot more specialization between all the different disciplines, and made it really difficult, I think, for them to work with one another, because all of a sudden you have this group of people over here who only think about waterproofing and MEP, and that's totally disconnected from the actual exterior design that an architect might do. And now there's an interior designer who does something different. So you have all these different kind of specialists trying to make something and keep design intent along the way. And of course, these projects 7 years later or whatever, it's like, okay, we got really far away maybe from the original idea. But with Journey, I totally see the vision of being like, oh no, we're going to be able to build you something very cohesive, that melds everything together, almost in the way that an architect who was a master builder, let's say, in the olden days did, because they were responsible for kind of doing everything. I think of architects even more, I guess, modern, like Carlo Scarpa, who was like an Italian architect in the 50s and 60s. And he would do designs where, the gutter of a building would become part of the stairs and then run off into a grate, and it was all integrated. So it was all like one design together, and it becomes a very beautiful, cohesive feeling space, because all those things are thought of from one point of view, and everyone's kind of on the same page. It'd be interesting to hear from you whether you think more and more firms in the future will basically continue to do this. We're seeing a lot of acquisitions and mergers these days. Like, I think Henning Larsen got acquired by Ramble not too long ago, and it's going to have this architecture firm and this big GC, and now they work together. Curious to hear, from your seat, like, do you think this is happening more and more, and is it actually a good thing maybe for the client? It, I guess, reduces billing and number of external parties that they have to wrangle, but does it dissolve people's specialties too?
Well, if we look at someone like Scarpa or like a Gaudi or like any of these sort of the Mount Rushmores of design, they tend to they had a patron, so they were in a fortunate position where they sort of had one client that trusted them implicitly to carry an idea all the way through. And I think that's probably still the core of it. It has so much to do with trust, that you are going to be able to carry something through. You're going to see it through. You're going to take a vision and you're going to actually deliver it on the other side of it. I don't know the exact reasons why things broke up. Certainly the kind of rise of the consultant, the sort of, the middleman, for lack of a better word, that kind of came into the profession of architecture to protect the client and then manage things like, institute competitions and sort of, we'll take the role of protecting the client and we'll organize all the trades. Obviously that still exists. And then if you're doing kind of shell and core architecture, you're doing, you're making something that can't, fall down. It's the number one most important thing. There's so much liability involved. And so, and depending on the country you're in and how litigious it is, so there's another number of dynamics, it makes sense to have the ability for the client to be protected at the same time. And I think the sort of specialisms are good businesses, if you can really hyper specialize in something, exactly your customers and you can really go after that, marketing, comms, all these things become simpler. I do think that maybe that's broken down a little bit, where there's maybe some sort of consultant fatigue that's happened. Now, granted, the projects we go on, if I was to look at our client, like the bucket we would put them in, it tends to be people who are trying to do something quite unusual. So they can't be a corporate, but I'll give you a good example. Is one of our clients is JP Morgan Chase, and we designed the Sapphire lounges. It's a big partner of ours. That's quite an unusual business decision, right? We're going to double down on airport lounges to drive customer loyalty. It's actually not that. Right now there's lots of people doing it, but at the time, that is there weren't many people thinking that way and doing it that way, and there's a whole ROI and business behind it. We're appealing to that situation because it's unusual and it's unique and it's not really clear who to go to. So you need to, and then over time you build trust with the client. So I think we look for opportunities that there won't be a lot of competition in terms of what we're trying to do and what we offer. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for clients who are trying to do something that hasn't really been done before or hasn't been done a lot. And that, then you can sidestep in a way being in this whole consultant mix, and you're almost specialized within the context of the project, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So trying to find opportunities in clients is a big part of this game we're in.
No, I love that, and I think it segues nicely into something that we talk about a lot, which is positioning, and how can you position your firm or brand your firm in a way to attract the right clients. And I think basically what you're saying is, with Journey, we've kind of established ourselves as the weirdos, or creative folks who can think outside the box. And if there's a weird problem, you call us. Yeah. And for the clients, it kind of makes sense too, because then they know now your reputation and your repertoire, and basically, if we're going to do something boring and safe, these are the wrong people. So you can kind of match make better or filter better as well on both sides, right? And I think when I look at most architecture firms, that's a huge problem that especially kind of the middle tier ones have, where nobody can really say what they do, or they pitch for everything.
Sure.
And I think that is becoming something that's is less and less tenable, I guess, because you can pitch for everything under the sun if you want, but you're just as my friend Sean Mulligan say, you're pushing brand new Porsche off a cliff, kind of like every time you're doing that.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of, I hate competitions. I think I think it's a completely corrupted part of the profession. It's, the people who get paid the most are the ones who organize the competition, so I don't necessarily think it serves the client's best interest. Now, they're not all the same, but for the most part, it's a pretty terrible way to buy something. And the industry is like taking it as, oh, this is how it's always, it's like most things. If you look back, it's probably less than 50 years or that people have been doing that. Like, we just take it like, oh, it's always been like this. It probably hasn't. I'm sure it hasn't. I haven't gone back and looked at, like, the Romans and Greeks were not doing competitions on architecture. But if you're not going to do that, then you have to have a very strong point of view. You have to be as clear as possible of how you think about the work, the profession, and you have to articulate that as much as possible. And I think you need to sort of deliver value in that positioning. So, we've talked about this before, this 95-5 rule, right? So, like, only 5% of the market is ready to buy at any one time. So normally you're speaking to 95% of the market. Well, if they're not in the buying situation, why would they read your content? Why would they care about what you're writing or what you're putting out there? Like, if you're just showing them case studies, well, like, do they really care? I mean, you're not going to look at someone's case studies if you're not interested in hiring a firm, for the most part. Mm-hmm. So you've got to communicate in a way that there's value in what you're putting out there. That's not to say, we write content, we produce content. Sometimes that ties in very clearly to our case studies, or we'll see a thread through a number of projects and we try to frame it in such a way that helps people see the way we think about the work. But this is like a Peter Druckerism, like the point of marketing comms is so that there's no sell. People show up ready to buy because they already understand what it is that you do and your sort of view of the world and of the industry. So that's hard work, and you've got to do it. I read this the other day, which is like an RFP it's a homework assignment, and it's kind of the easiest thing in the world to do. It comes in your inbox and like, here's this amazing project you never heard about, and now you get to work. You could potentially get to work on it. We all kind of love that because weirdly, it's like we've just been given homework and like an assignment, and now we get to like tell them why we're so great. But if you're not trying to really think about whether this is a good opportunity for you, or like in the words of people like Blair Enns, who wrote this amazing book, Win Without Pitching. Like, if you're not trying to disrupt that process in some way, or understand the people behind it, or go and have a conversation with them, then you've sort of already lost, because this idea that you've got some amazing idea and that's going to persuade people to push the 9 other responses aside and choose you, like, it's literally throwing darts at a dartboard in a dark room. Like, you have no idea.
It's pretty much impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels good. It feels like you're doing something that it's a good use of your time, but it's really, I think it's really not, and if you look at the percentages of what you win, I mean, the last thing you want to do is like put forward creative, give free creative away and do these things. I'm not saying we don't do, we do this, but it depends on the circumstance. And we really try to be as strategic as possible about what we're going to go after and why. And we do try to build relationships behind the scene, or get to those people before, build relationships in those industries or with those clients before an RFP comes around. Again, that doesn't guarantee you're going to win it, but like that at least gives you a little bit more visibility.
Increases your odds. And I think also just, people, I know there's some folks who always think, oh, if you do that kind of work before an RFP, it's like nepotism. It's kind of like, well, if you're the client, why would you trust somebody who just comes into your inbox versus somebody that you've met in person who gets you?
Yeah.
I think we love to talk about this topic of getting a clients. And,
Sure.
I think, I'd love to hear from you, maybe some stories or kind of information about what you guys do or what you like to do when it comes to this kind of client relationship and just like making yourself familiar or understanding them or servicing them better. I think so many people, they submit an proposal and it's like 68 pages that's all about them and nothing about the client, right? And
Yes.
if you're the client, even if this person has met you before, it's kind of like a turnoff, right? Where you're like, oh, he's just talking about himself the whole time. It's like I love dating analogies when it comes to client relations, and it's kind of like imagine going on a date with somebody and they just talk about how awesome they are. It's like, oh man, how terrible is that date, right? And like,
Yes.
The more you can do to kind of like figure out like, oh, she's really into like jet skiing. I don't know, it's a random example. But like, we can talk about water sports and she'll probably like it, instead of me talking about like, oh yeah, I just love cars, Ferrari is my favorite brand. I go to the F1 Grand Prix all the time. It's like, if she doesn't like that, like, don't talk about it,
Well, the weird thing is the person who talks about themselves the most is the one having the best time, right, on the date. And sometimes, so it's okay with a client to let them talk about how much they love, whatever Formula One and Ferraris and jet skiing, whatever their interest is, and you're just sitting back and listening and absorbing and trying to understand who they are as a person. And that goes for how you respond to a proposal. Like if you can, I think it takes guts to like give your point of view on, an RFP comes through and you give your point of view on what they should do and why and how you think how they should frame the project. So if you spend more time talking about that than talking about your own firm, you have a better chance of cutting through. And that goes in, it's conversations, being a good listener. It's like actively listening, picking up on clues that maybe translate in, our profession to do something that's spatial and within sort of the built environment. So you're looking for clues that will help inform how you think about the project or how you're going to respond to that client. And it's just true that in life as in work, the less you talk about yourself, the more powerful of a position you put yourself in. But it's hard to do. I just think, I don't know if it's within the creative profession, this sort of, like this desire to constantly show your own work, your own thinking, but it's a problem that if we were to measure someone's like their interest in the conversation, as soon as you crank the portfolio and start going through your projects, like their interest dies. It's like, yeah, totally. And this, like if you interview people, it's the same. If they just sit there and talk through their own work, it's very different than if someone pulls up their portfolio and then they allow you to ask questions about the portfolio. It's a night and day interview. Mm-hmm. But also, I don't think we put ourselves in the client's shoes enough. Something I've learned late in my life is that, because Journey is a fairly large and complicated business, I have like daily information overload. So it's like I'm constantly. It's just like a, fire hose of information. And I totally understand. Like when you go and sit in front of a client, especially a big corporate client, that their day is 10 to 100x that. So if you're going to sit in front of them and start showing your work, it's literally the last thing in the world they want to do. Like they want to just sit down and have a conversation and see if there's a rapport, or they can kind of understand how someone thinks and their frame of view on the world, and that might be done by asking, smart questions. But if you're going to force them to sit down and just absorb more information, it's over.
Mm.
And chances are that you're in the room because they already looked at that. They already looked at your website. They already looked at your portfolio. They heard about you. You've been vetted already. So why are you making them vet you again?
Mm-hmm. Do you have a set of questions you like to ask people, or do you find that you like to do a lot of research beforehand and then kind of bring that to the table as like a way to elicit a response? I know some folks, they just go in pretty cold, and they really just to make it like, try to have the client tell them as much as possible. Some people, they like to probe and kind of, figure out specific questions and answers. Be curious to hear your take.
I'm sort of a cold person, but I've got myself into trouble because like I will not know something so basic that I should have known, and if I just took 30 seconds, like I wouldn't, So I've toyed around with it. Just one use of AI that's quite good is that you can get a summary on someone and get all the high level information that at least you don't have to ask dumb questions. If they maybe they've been in this company for 6 months and they were 20 years at Johnson & Johnson before, like you'll know that, so you don't have to ask a stupid question like, have you worked here long? So how do you get past the okay, everyone should already know, have a base level of information, and then start to dig a little bit deeper, and mixing people's own careers and their own ambitions with the project goals, I think is a very good recipe because they tend to be connected in some way, right? People's job, so again, if we go back to this issue of trust, there's risk involved in this project, and they need to trust you that you are going to mitigate, or you are going to succeed within the context of the risk that's involved. And in order to do that, there has to be trust. So you're asking questions that allows you to build trust with someone. And that's going to be a mixture of personal and professional, because their job could be on the line, or promotions on the line, or the business is on the line, so, and I think most people nowadays, their work and their life are intertwined, and maybe in an uncomfortable way, but I think that's just the reality of the world we live in now.
Completely. I feel like there's an odd amount that you can take away just looking at someone's job history and their current title, because that trajectory tells you a lot about them. I remember looking at somebody for one of my clients, and she is the head of marketing for like a real estate group, but she also has had her own coffee business for years, right? And so like we were analyzing her profile with Foviate, and it was telling us like, oh, well, brand consistency is going to be a big deal to her because she runs her own coffee chain. So when you are talking about, presenting new solutions or new renders to her, like that's really a big thing, is the renders should have a consistent, visual look. The logos that are representing the brand should be there. They should be perfect. The styling of the imagery, colorways, like all needs to be consistent. I was like, wow, this is like pretty accurate. Like if I was a lady who had my own brand, but I'm, managing a company that doesn't necessarily have a strong brand identity in the same way that like Johnson & Johnson or McDonald's does. Like, I don't know if you could go talk about any real estate company and say, oh yeah, that real estate company, I know what their brand is, right? Like that's pretty difficult. So I appreciate, like that analysis that can happen and one can kind of deduce from those kinds of things. Sure. I think architects maybe need to take a note from experienced designers about that kind of thing, because experience design is so brand related that it matters a lot to these people. But I think a lot of architects are really more on like the design side, and design feels like it should be expressive, much more process oriented, coming from me as the architect who's a genius, versus if you're an experienced designer. I think there's a little bit more of a service nature built in to the career path, where branding as a starting point is big. And also think about it maybe a little bit like the original architect. So much about what they do is experience related. Like, what's the procession of someone going to feel like when they've built the ancient Greek Acropolis in Athens, right? Like going up that pathway meant something symbolic. I think there's a little bit of that lost in today's architectural designs, but perhaps is more prevalent in journeys designs or experience design, because that is the point of hiring journey in many ways.
Yeah, it's that strategic upfront work is the most important part of what we do. It really asking weeks worth of questions, like who's going to come here? Why are they going to come here? When are they going to come here? Like the beginning, in the morning, in the afternoon, at the night. If they only come in the night, they should also come in the morning. How are we going to figure out? So like, it's our job to look at this from every possible angle and then consider their price per head, even the communication of this idea back to, some of our work is the internal comms to get an idea over the line. We have to look at this from all angles. There was an interesting talk. There's SCGD, if you're aware of this. There was an interesting talk where David Schwartz from Hush and Jason Bruges, the artist, spoke, and they compared their portfolios, and sometimes they came to the same result, almost on the same project. Like, in Hush's parlance, be like a waterfall of information, and Jason is like a waterfall of light. And Jason's process, because he's an artist, is just to like go and create and not really overthink it. And then from a Hush point of view, it's very similar to Journey in the sense it's like this deep strategy behind it. And I was asking David Schwartz about this after the fact, the principal of Hush, and he said, "Look, Jason doesn't do the strategy, but someone had to." I do think that's just like it. Sometimes, in the creative profession, a lot of people come from an artistic background, so there can be a frustration. And maybe this is what you're speaking to in terms of architecture. Architecture is, it's an art form, and there's a frustration where like, well, I'm an artist and this is my art, and you need to see it for that reason. That might all be true, but somewhere in there, some very deep strategy happened or should have happened to decide whether or not this is the right thing to do in this location. And I think some architecture is not successful because that didn't happen. One of like my architectural heroes, Cedric Price, he has this famous line, which is, some people ask for a house, but what they need is a divorce. And if you're just in the business of designing houses for people without actually asking second and third order questions, then maybe you're just not a very good architect, right? Like, it's important to understand the underlying motivations. And also, if it's a building that's going to go into a community, into a neighborhood, it's important to understand the dynamics of that place and what you're bringing there. And it's okay to push people forward and make them a little bit uncomfortable or create something they've never seen before. I mean, I have absolutely no issue with that, but you got to like at least, be sensitive or empathetic in terms of where something's going. And the advent of like Rhino and 3D modeling, I think did put us into a generation of like spinny shapes on screens without considering the context of where something goes. And it looks amazing in photographs. It gets shared a lot on Instagram, but then they can't let the building because nobody actually wants to be there. So, maybe it starts with Bilbao and Gary, but that's a very successful building, right? Like that, is an alien that lands in a Catalan town, but it completely changed the dynamic of the city, which is exactly what they were looking for and wanted. Like, it served the purposes of Guggenheim. It served the purposes of Bilbao as a city. So it's possible to create something fantastic and fanciful, but also get it right in terms of where it's going, what its purpose is, and why it's there.
Now that's I think that completely makes sense for that use case, and it can happen everywhere. I would say Frank Gehry is like unusually good at that, though. Or I think of his little pavilion in Chicago, and also the Bean.
Yeah.
And, like, I studied the economics of that, and like the amount of footfall that they get in that area because of those two things, and just how much money it generates for everybody in the city is insane. So I think there definitely is, one side, which I guess maybe is on Frank Gehry's in this analogy, that is the strategic side, and then Anish Kapoor just like gets to be the artist, because I don't think Anish Kapoor really thought like, oh, they're gonna call this cloud pavilion sculpture the Bean, and like everyone's gonna come here and take a selfie. Like, I don't know, that culture wasn't there at the time. I think that was like really, right time, right place in many ways.
Yeah.
But
so that's what I mean. Someone did that strategy. Someone, and I don't know all the people involved in the creation of that park, but like, that's a successful urban intervention in a city that probably needed it more than anyone at the time. And someone really thought about it. They did the underlying strategy and they got it right. And you can see it's a destination now when you go to Chicago. It's a successful project.
Yes, I think that segues a little bit nicely into something I wanted to talk about, is this idea that rendering is no longer like a finite thing, and that we're producing thousands of renders per project. Clients are taking our renders and editing them,
making their own renders,
and it's kind of a weird thing where it's like, hey, that's my IP that they're editing. We don't give them 3D models for that reason, because they could just take it and go to somebody else. But there's nothing stopping them from doing this now. It's just becoming more and more of a thing. And I think it's an interesting idea that maybe that's actually good. Like, I've had a thought, I'd love to hear your opinion, where, we talk a lot about design being something that you kind of have to guess about, like whether the client's going to like it or not. I wonder if there's a future where the designer or design firm is not necessarily valued for being the deliverer of a deliverable. They're not the creator of a deliverable per se. They're rather the value, and you've written about this, is moving towards an experience. And maybe the value that we're adding in the future is actually the client experience, and not so much the design drawings that we're submitting, the renders that we're creating. Granted, those are valuable things, but like you're saying, the strategy is why somebody hires Hush versus Jason. Like, maybe the output is very similar, but David at Hush is thinking super deeply about how do we, show off this brand, how we make this a place where people can stay, this waterfall of data. What is it doing to people as they walk by? Like, if it's on for 8 hours a day, does it just loop? Is it something procedural? Does it update over time? Does it continue to add to the brand, as years go on and evolve and morph? So David's like, and Journey presumably doing all of that, right? And to the client, if you hear this, you're kind of like, oh, this is solving so many problems for me. Whereas, with Jason, and I used to work in the art world, so I know, we artists can be like this too. We're kind of like proposing an idea that is just supposed to be aesthetic enough or interesting enough that it kind of captivates and is marketable and stuff like that. So we're kind of like coming at it from two different sides. Maybe one is a little bit more strategy oriented, and one is a little bit more maybe humanistic, in the sense that it's you don't need to like know all these other things in order to get it. And I'd be curious to hear on your side, based upon your writing, do you think this kind of more abstract value is where the money is where things are going, and the execution and delivery of it matters less? I almost think about it like fine dining. You're paying $3,000, let's say, to have a super high-end 3-star Michelin meal, the execution is just kind of assumed, I guess, in that case.
There's like many people, I grew up, watching movie, being enamored by the architect in the movie who stays up all night building a model with a big presentation in the morning, and then it's like, here's my idea, and it's so amazing. And I think Hollywood, it's kind of funny because Hollywood is what made me want to go into the creative profession, because I fell victim to the concept of the sort of creative genius. And then when I worked in Hollywood, I'm like, there's 1,000 people on this set, but that's not a clean story. A clean story is, whatever Christopher Nolan, probably maybe Christopher Nolan is a bad example, but like this one visionary created this film, or like a Kubrick or whatever. And like, the more you dig into any of these, or if you've had the experience to work in this profession, it's like, there's so many people involved, so many people. And now even more so, where like, if one person, like one thing drops out, the project doesn't have, and this is across the board. These are, most creative endeavors and projects are quite complicated to pull off. And they require a team of people, working in tandem and working together. So I kind of accepted that early in my career, that, this is a team sport, and lots of different people have a part to play. When it comes to hospitality, and you very kindly sent me this book, Unreasonable Hospitality, which I read, like, it's just weird. I read like on my summer vacation, which is kind of like sad on some level, or like surely I should be reading fiction, not a nonfiction book about like starting.
But it's fascinating, right?
It's very, very, very fascinating, and there's many interesting parts to it. But one is that they do a new menu, as they do every year, and Will, the author, measured how many times someone was interrupted during a 4-hour meal. I think it was like 90 times. And they're like, whoa, like, what are we doing? Like, and I think, potentially part of why 11 Madison's so famous is because it's this front of house, back of house partnership. They're thinking so much about what it feels like as a guest to do everything, to book your reservation, to come to the door, where you put your bags, how you sit down, what's the first thing that arrives, what's the last thing, what's the thing they give you on your way out the door. I mean, that is experiences. There's no doubt about it. And of course the food's amazing, right? But like, thinking about, we don't want to interrupt people too much, which might be counterintuitive, because you would think that, you're going to a fancy restaurant, you want people to check in on you constantly, etc. Well, it turns out, no, that's the opposite of what people want to do. Or some people want to, it depends. But also, can you read the room and adapt at the same time? These are very, very important lessons. And thinking about things from a visitor point of view, from a client point of view, from a contextual point of view, is good design. I mean, the Eames, Charles and Ray Eames wrote about this, their partnership with Eero Saarinen, where they would really, I think it was doing the one of the airports, so they're doing furniture and Saarinen's doing the architecture. They looked at the situation from every different conceivable angle. Like, these were deep strategists. They really thought they were top-notch creative. There's no question about it. But they really asked interesting questions, and they distilled things down to their essential parts. And if you're driven by ego and driven by your vision, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, I think that leads to problematic architecture and problematic experiences. I mean, we see it all over the place.
I wonder then if that's something we should emphasize, maybe, kind of about a design culture moving forward. Strategy is not as celebrated, I think, or as, I don't think most clients would say like, oh yeah, like this architect, they're very strategic.
Yeah,
It's not like
but also it's another nebulous term, not easily defined. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. So we're using it interchangeably. I think what we're getting at is it is some level of hospitality, or it is some level of empathy, or seeing things through another person's perspective. Arguably, that's not strategy. But what we're saying is that you've got to go a little bit deeper, and you probably need to bring the client. You do need to bring the client on that journey with you and the process with you, so they feel like they're part of it. And you need to consider the visitor and bring them through that as well. So I guess what we're talking about is, yeah, more EQ, more empathy, more like looking at the whole situation. Like I think about this, something that's very interesting about us' journey is the sector of sports, let's say, in stadium design. And what I think this, like, arguably the cathedral of experience is a stadium, right?
Our modern era, yeah.
It really has. But they've been extractive, for much of, or let's say, like, I don't know when this starts to shift, but certainly the last 30, 40 years, it was like, you basically make a city pay for it, through some sort of tax structure. And the value back to the city is actually not very great, because it's just like higher ticket prices and traffic and whatever. Like, because they were not, while they took it, the team owners or the leagues themselves took advantage of the passion for the team and then extracted as much value as possible out of the place. And that's changed. Yeah. So that you can't, I think it's very hard for you to actually go and build a stadium now without actually looking at all of the components that go into it and the second and third order effects that has on the city. It should be a value add to the city. It shouldn't lay dormant whenever there's whenever there's not a game. It needs to feel like it's an investment of the city. It's with the city. It's with the people of the city. Ticket prices they're going to get more expensive. That might be inevitable. But can I go to this place when there's not a game and have an activity? Is this a part of our city, or just something that gets turned on, in a football stadium, essentially, 8 times a year or whatever? So something ridiculous. So I think that, to me, is what's changing in terms of design, is that and this is maybe breaking down the specialisms, is that you really do need to be aware of and be considering and thinking about all of the different aspects of what you do. And the idea that you're just going to get hired to do one thing very well, probably, I suppose, it's changing on some level. It doesn't mean we don't pull in specialists on our own projects that sit outside the business, but and I think that's okay if you're a small studio and an individual, but if you're trying to do something at scale, you've got to be much more considerate in terms of the machinery and the infrastructure in which you're operating in.
Mm-hmm. Stadiums are an interesting one, where I feel like in the past, certainly like, the Coliseum or whatever, the stadium was a free thing that was, made that place. And it was considered to be such an integration for the public. And maybe ancient Rome was a bad example, because they had free bathhouses, and like so much of the infrastructure was free, and the stadium was a piece of infrastructure. But I think it does speak to perhaps a shift that we're seeing over time, where we're not just building buildings as bespoke alien objects. Like, I think we've been doing that pretty consistently for the past, 30, 40 years. And I think even China, all star architecture was in China for the past, let's say 20 years. They came out with a rule or a mandate a couple years ago that was like, no more weird buildings, because everybody was like, we're just building like, we love OMA, but like the underwear building randomly that isn't really integrated with anything.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
people are asking, and this is why I feel like the experience design economy is really going to take off. People are asking for better integrated constructions, parts of their built environments that are connected with one another, things that honestly the digital sphere has failed us in actually connecting, right? They probably
Sure.
do more to separate us than ever. So I think that this is where this new experience design is such a nascent industry, like this new kind of like version of architecture, I almost want to say, because it is so different from traditional architecture, is moving towards. And to be honest, I think the economics of it are much better, because you are selling strategy, you're selling an outcome, you're selling people gathering and like being changed, having experience, having a memory of something, like I think
That's right.
Disneyland, versus like a mall, right? Now America's malls are like empty. There's nobody goes there because they're like, yeah, I'm just extracted of my, money through bad food at a food court, like stores that are honestly repeatable anywhere else in the world. Um, it's interesting to see that, like, airports, um, stadiums, like these kind of more unique versions of architecture are what's kind of becoming places, or have been the places where these new experience economy versions of the built environment are burgeoning. I think probably Journey is working on many other projects that are reimaginings of traditional commercial spaces like malls, where they probably are asking for um, something new, right? Something where it's like, hey, Journey, like, what can you do to take this retail experience that used to be cool 30
Yeah.
years ago and turn it into something amazing?
I mean, my colleague Ryan Carlisle, he wrote a really interesting like history of shopping centers and malls, and this is a pretty like semi-utopian ideal, which was in the suburban area. You lack a sort of downtown, so it was meant to emulate all the aspects of a downtown. Instead, it just became overrun by commerce, just basically shops. And I think there's things to be careful of. It's one question I have for Joe Pine, actually, is like, are we in an experience bubble? So I think that you can't, when you do this well, it's a mix of free. When you create a plate, and this is in urban planning or master planning, you can't just have like luxury everything, right? Luxury shops, luxury ticket prices, it's like an accountant's way to look at a successful place, but it will fail. If you want to drive footfall, footfall drives footfall, and often it's the free things that are happening there that are creating the momentum and the people and the volume. So you're having a good mix of things that have different price points, including free, all the way up to luxury, is what makes a great place. And so you got to be a little bit experimental about what people can do there, and not try to monetize every square inch of it, because it'll fail. That's why we have so many empty shopping centers. But I love malls. We love malls. We love malls. We love airports. We love stadiums. We love like downtowns that are empty. We love like cities that someone blasted a highway through and then they're trying to unpick that. Like a lot of terrible urban planning, especially in the United States, that happened in the sort of 80s and 90s, trying to unwind those things. We love those kinds of projects. It's definitely what we're interested in. There's another aspect, which is like the professionalization of college sports, and then how that will start to change college campuses, and how can that all be done with thought and empathy, all the things that we talked about. So there's a lot of opportunities to do these things correctly. I think the age of the star architect is, I think, over, and And that was probably a product of the early days of Instagram as well, like just, sort of monumental, very photographable architecture. And I don't know. I don't want to close the book on certain things. Just, I do wonder how that will play out. It's funny, the Lucas Museum is opening, which is probably one of one of the last of this sort of. And I don't live in Los Angeles, so I'll be curious how that starts to like weave into the city, and whether that's becomes of its time or is pointing to the future, because it does actually. I have no opinion on it, but
we'll have to go and see.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I mean, we did pitch on it. We had like this a long time ago. I would have loved to work on that project. So there's a lot of work to do within cities, weaving neighborhoods together, these types of experiences, thinking about them as an ecosystem of experiences, and that, theaters, small theaters, medium-sized theaters, restaurants, fringe sort of destinations. These are all part of driving footfall, and that you need all of that mixed together. And from our point of view, we're interested at all of those scales because there's so much to learn from one and apply it to another. Like we work the Blue Chip Museum, and we bring lots of like fringe theater ideas to that project, and they're, as clients, are very interested in that exchange, and I think that's been a huge change that I've seen in the last at least 5 years, where there's less stigma associated to borrowing or being influenced by ideas from what would have been considered to be like monoculture. So oh, well, that's not very interesting. That's not, we wouldn't learn from like, whatever, a fast fashion retail brand because we are a luxury, I don't see that anymore. It's way easier to cross between cultural poles because people are interested to learn and be exposed to different types of ideas.
Do you find that on the client side, they're open to that as well now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Really, really 100%. And I think it's a little bit generational too. Maybe the internet in many ways flattened everything, so there's this idea of like selling out doesn't really exist anymore. I see the smart ones, let's say, are willing to kind of learn from everyone. The people who are in their protected in their gilded cage probably aren't going to. They were never going to learn, and they're not particularly interested, and they're not going to hire people like us, right? So the people who hire us are the ones who are curious about the world, curious about the future, care about their sector and want to see it thrive.
You need to add that to the journey, like qualification form, some sort of like cryptic question. Stop touching my mic here. A question that basically figures out how open they are to new and kind of funky ideas. Obviously, like there's something you could ask this thing. How would you feel about like a cake that had this kind of flavor? And they'd be like, oh no, I would never even think about trying that. You're like, all right, well, we're just never going to work.
Love that. It's like that would be the best kind of bot ever to have on your website, which asks very cryptic questions.
It's like kind of like Blade Runner or something.
It's quite the opposite. Like you can't get through the door unless you answer those questions.
I think that's maybe you guys do that already with your discovery, because it sounds like you have such an intense process asking them so much about what they want to do with this project. I think that's something too where it's just another level of empathy and interest that maybe most people don't show.
We have a lot of gamers and background in gaming, and then so that our process is it is games. It's like creating, because, clients aren't, especially in a room, they're not so forthcoming in terms, like people don't say what they really think. So we create games and exercises that allow people to, break the ice, give their actual opinion. We do like these surveys, but they're fun. We have like almost like a Tinder, you're like idea Tinder. Yeah. So those kind of things are really, really helpful, because really what we want are people to be honest and give us the right information and not try to be performative in those sort of strategy situations. So games are really, really helpful.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I have a form that I used to send people that was, it would ask them certain questions to figure out like, what's your approach to budget? Are you go big or go home? Are you like every dollar must be considered? And I find, people are, if you ask them straight up, it's really difficult for them to tell you the truth for whatever reason. So if you can like kind of gamify it, like you're saying, in a way, it's just become such a easier and honestly more fun process for them. I imagine if I'm like a client at JP Morgan and Journey sends me some fun game to try that's like render personalization a Tinder, it's like figuring out which styles I like. I feel like, okay, no one else is sending me this. They just sent me like an 80-page PDF, but this is like way better.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's really true. You make it fun and make it interesting. We're in the creative profession. Most of our clients are not. So the time they get to spend with you is sometimes the highlight of their week. So make it enjoy it. If you're an accountant, not no shade on accountants, but like, and then we have an hour together where we talk about like the vision for your project. That's a great hour out of your week. Make it enjoyable, make it interesting for them, make them feel like they're part of the process. That's definitely that attitude of inviting them in and really wanting people to participate is a recipe for a great result, great project.
And I think that, that also touches upon something we spoke about before. I know we're close to time here, where you were saying, pay attention and listen to this person, try to figure out the things that they like, things that they don't like, what their goals are, what the risks are for them. And if you incorporate that into the design process and basically every communication that you have with them, you could be completely making their day. And people are happy to spend money on things they get value from. So if you are adding value to their day just by making it more enjoyable to be working with you and have this process, I think that's a huge value add that we as designers don't honestly think about, like that client experience of, every time Matt calls me, I just know it's going to be a great time. I look forward to it versus like, this consultant Jim calls me and he's just like pounding me with technical information and like forcing me to make decisions. Like, I don't even want to do that. Like, I want fewer decisions in my life. I want peace. This other thing is way more enjoyable.
Yeah. And the way I practice that is by spending a lot of time with a lot of different people from lots of different backgrounds. And like, I don't, one thing I'm always trying to change in my own life is not to over-index on like commercial relationships. I've always been in I've always had to get work. Or, so it doesn't matter. When I was young, I was trying to get work. When I had my own studio, I was constantly trying to get work. It's like, it doesn't matter what my actual job is, you also have to get work. And that will force you to seek out clients and seek out those type of relationships. But actually, if you're just in that circle, you're not a very good participant because you have nothing to bring and nothing to add. So it's important for you to like, look, if you're in this business and you live in New York City, you've probably run into me at something because I go out a lot. I like to be out a lot. I like to interact with people. I don't mind if they're young and starting out or I'm very happy to like spend time with people and speak to people and be generous with my time, because I know that is how you build a network and that's how you hear about projects. It's how you know what's coming. I could sit here and just like email all day and be like, hey, do you have any work for us? Like, or I could just go out in the world and talk to people and, be a bit strategic about where you show up, but try not to overthink it. And, the reception, the person at reception is just as important as the CEO. So you can't push people aside. And those, I'm old enough now to like have watched my friends become clients, so that's just time. So, never discount young people in their career, people moving in their career, changing jobs, like rethinking where they're going to go, selling a business, buying a business, like all of these are very interesting subjects. And if you ask a lot of questions, you learn a lot about the world and about other professions, which is how, because normally we work obviously in sectors, we're not selling creative services to creative companies. So you've got to know about other sectors and the challenges of other businesses, the challenges of clients. The only way to really learn that is to talk to people.
Of course, yeah. That human relationship and like that building that rapport. It's also just good for yourself, becoming a more well-rounded person. I think for designers, we love to just kind of like max out our design skills.
Yeah.
But actually learning about a bunch of other things like, what do accountants actually do? Like, why would JP Morgan, like a bank, want to get into airports?
Yeah.
It's like you can make that a really interesting topic if you open your mind to it. We're at time here, Matt. We've gone over, so I think we have to start closing it out. But
sorry, everyone.
This is an amazing conversation. I want to close with a question for you, actually.
Okay.
Looking ahead, 5 years from now, what do you think the winning firm looks like? Like, who is going to really dominate, let's say, in the next couple of years?
Well, obviously, Journey. I think it's the AI hedge right now is personal relationships. It is like human to human discovery, when everyone has the same tools to like get any piece of information at any time, that information is commoditized. Like, I read somewhere where like the internet's going to be now like bots talking to bots. Like we won't go on the internet because we'll just be like, hey bot, what's going on the internet today? So I can see that coming, like actually pretty fast. So, I think we're in the right place, right? So we're thinking about human interaction within physical space that incorporates all the digital and technology that we're so accustomed to, and it's like second nature. Understanding the psychology of human beings and what they're interested in and how they participate in the world and what's important to them is kind of where you want to be. You want to creativity can mean anything. It's evolved over time. It was very tech focused from, the Internet of Things, 2000 to 2010, 2015. It was moved into software, it moved into, digital twins. We've been part of all all of these now are tools that help to make physical spaces and bring people together and improve, the cities and the infrastructure of our world and where we live. So I think being in that space is important. Designing for humans and human interaction and where humans come together to experience the world, and also leaving room for art and creativity and the things that actually inspire us as human beings, and not try to ROI everything to death.
Amen. I like that's a great, we can end on that one, guys. We got the clip. But I completely agree where, at the end of the day, if the bots are doing all the bot stuff on the internet and with all the numbers, like what do we have left, right? It's the human experience. It's our relationships. It's the experience. It's the things we're going to remember, the things we talk about with one another, the things that matter to each person.
Totally.
Focusing on that more and more is where all these things are going. And it's like you're saying, the AI agents are going to take over.
They're certainly going to take over the internet. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, there's no question. So, like, and then, people, I mean, sticking a kiosk in every restaurant, cafe, we will soon know it's a terrible idea, right? So we're going to have to unwind a little bit of this, the mass digitization of our sort of day-to-day interactions, because the real value will be in human to human relationship, tech enabled, so that, you don't have to write anything down, but like you can at least have a conversation with someone and they get their coffee at the same time, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to add to that, it's not just having a room and filling it with people, right? I think what we're talking about with Firmlink Journey is the strategy and the design and thought that goes into actually crafting a space that enables all that human connection. Yeah. And the only reason why I want to like end on this is because I went to a horrible tech event. What was it, last night or 2 nights ago? It was like on this rooftop bar, but it was run by some AI tech people, and there was just like nothing to do. There was no way to like find out who you should speak to. It was just literally like ramming people into a space. Kind of reminded me of like a school dance, but nobody knows each other, I was like, okay, this is why you need to hire real experienced designers.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone just has a pretty generic time. So I think the only thing I would maybe add to your prediction is that people who actually are strategic or really thoughtful or really empathetic or intelligent about these human relationships and understanding each other and how to bring people together in a meaningful way.
Yes.
Like the original definition of architecture, I think, is the design of significant space.
Huh.
Right? I think maybe the emphasis on significant rather than organization is the thing that we can all take with us.
Yeah, I'd say participation is a massive part of it, which we didn't really touch on, but just standing in a room and being surrounded by a screensaver is not anything anyone wants to do anymore. So, right. So like
we got that out of our system.
yeah, we're good. We're good. You need to participate in some way. I think you can be told a story. I can see us moving into more like this. We want stories. I mean, stories is how we connect as a species. Right now, there's more of a wanting to participate as well. It doesn't have to be full participation, but there's some level of participation and interaction. So, and meeting people you don't know, doing things with your friends, but then meeting other people along the way always makes a night that much better. And like, we can enable that.
Matt, I could just talk to you all day, so I'm gonna have to cut us off. We went hour 15 almost, but thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime. Thanks.
We're gonna have to get you back. But thank you everybody for joining us. That was Matt Quinn, Managing Director of Journey. Journey has offices all around the world, New York, London, I forget the other ones. But please, feel free to reach out to me or Matt, and we'd love to continue the conversation with you all.
Thank you, Keita.
All right, bye everybody. Signing off.